All right, guys. So, I, of course, watch quite a bit of different positions on both theism and atheism. It's a subject that's important to me. I think that it's important to people in general. Whether you believe or you don't, the question itself is absolutely significant. To claim that it isn't is just absurd to me. But there's many different methods of reaching people. And I particularly like, at least, well, there's different techniques and methods for different, what would you call them? I can't think of the word, but basically different groups of people, like target audiences. So Sam Harris has his own, he tends to hit things from a little bit more of a technical perspective. He uses more jargon and intellectual reasoning, I guess. There's people that even go way further than him in this area. But Neil deGrasse Tyson has a great ability to reach the everyman. Just people who aren't incredibly learned in philosophy and the kind of building blocks of extremely complex conversation about these topics. He's a very intelligent man, but he knows how to kind of turn down his knowledge or turn up his knowledge depending on who he's talking to. But most of the time, he has a tendency to want to reach average people, which makes sense because there's far more of them. Yeah, so what I want to do is play like a 20-minute video. The video is actually longer, but then it goes into essentially somebody doing exactly what I'm doing, which, yeah, the important thing is Neil deGrasse Tyson here. So I'm just going to be playing that, and yeah.
America, 90% of the nation would claim to be religious. And you define this in a way that's unambiguous. You don't say, well, do you go to church every Sunday? You don't ask that question. Plenty of people go to church who are not religious. They go to get a date or so. They go for the cupcakes or something. They don't go to be spiritually enlightened. So you ask a different question. You say, is there a God that listens to your prayers? If you answer yes to that, you're religious by anybody's definition, because your understanding of a deity is that that deity is monitoring your daily affairs. So that's unambiguous. This number's dropped in the last couple of years, but it's about 90%. Turns out if you go to college and get an advanced degree, a master's or a doctorate, where these are degrees where you actually question the state of existing knowledge. The undergraduate degree doesn't really do that. You're learning from textbooks that are written by somebody else. Your doctrines are already there. The higher degrees imply that you are questioning the very fabric of the knowledge you had previously learned. Among that community, it's 60%. It has dropped. Well, that's interesting. Let's keep going. How about scientists? Of all stripes. So biologists, chemists, let's include engineers as well. People who have formal scientific training, mathematicians as well. Okay, what happens next? Drops to 40%. Now, if you look at this number, it looks like, wow, so scientists, the public is 90%, scientists are 40%. No, the drop is not that significant because every scientist has an advanced degree. So in fact, the drop is not from 90 to 40, the drop is from 60 to 40. So becoming a scientist is not as big an effect on whether you're religious as you might otherwise think. Most of the drop comes because you're educated beyond the level of college. So that's 40%. So now you go to elite scientists, members of the National Academy, highly accomplished subset among scientists, the number drops to 7%. There was a headline in Nature, the British journal Nature, which said after this study was released, 93% of elite scientists reject God. So that was supposed to be a shocking headline. And I look at that and I said, that's not even interesting. That was the trend line anyway. What's more interesting, which was not the headline, is that 7% of elite scientists pray to a God. Isn't that a more interesting fact to you? Isn't that kind of interesting? The most accomplished scientists in the world in that community, 7% of them still pray to a personal God. I think that is deserving of more study than the 93% who don't. Because something's going on there.
I agree with him on this. That should be the focus. One, it's the lower percentage, which means it should be easier to isolate. And it's a whole lot easier to control and set up like case studies for 7% than 93%, obviously. It is also interesting. I agree with his flip side here, because we want to understand as much as we possibly can why 7% of them believe. Because it's very uncommon, especially among elite scientists. Anyhow, continuing.
We don't know what. And I have confronted people on this. I would say to the most sort of vociferous in the atheist community, I would say, you're beating the public over the head, telling them, why are you doing it? And I'm thinking, before you beat the public, why don't you beat them over the head, okay? No, I'm just saying, if you're going to rank, if you just, because you understand that first, because if you can't convert that 7%, you've got no hope in the general public.
This is also a valid point, and I hadn't quite thought of it in that way before. He is logically right. Like, it in terms of like your chance for success when engaging in like an intellectual debate, for example, your chances of reaching, at least presumably, the 7% of elite scientists should be greater by a pretty massive margin. At least I would think so. So there's other factors like the level of belief, like the level of certainty, I guess. So there's so much that we don't know. Like, out of that 7%, what is their certainty level? So my belief would be, or I don't know, I would like to think that those 7% are not like 100% like you tend to get with religious people. To me, that's kind of an indication that they didn't get there through critical thinking, because if they did, they wouldn't be 100%. You can only get there through like shutting your brain off. That's what I call it anyway. That's faith. It's going like, yeah, don't think about this. Nope, it's true. For whatever reason, because you're afraid of death or whatever the reason is, it doesn't even matter. You're taught that, yeah. But one thing is, because they're intelligent does not mean that they will automatically use critical thinking in all avenues of life. Some people have a tendency to compartmentalize. That like, in other words, what I'm saying is, being intelligent doesn't make you immune to fallacious thinking. You can be entirely logical about almost everything and then have like one subject where you're completely like batshit crazy, basically. So I guess I would be interested in maybe if they could set up case studies to find out more about this 7%. It's a good starting place. Find out why they believe what they do. Find out whether or not, and this is important, you want to get them to lay out their personal set of evidence that led them toward this belief in as much detail as possible. Why do they believe what they believe? Like, why do they think it's likely? It's important. And just that can tell you so much. And then we can compare and contrast that to the answers that you would normally get from the general public, which we all know by now. At least I would hope so. They tend to be variations of the exact one or two different reasons. It's always goes back to those, which to me anyway is entirely irrational and indicative of a defense mechanism. But so I would believe that the 7% are still engaging in a defense mechanism, no doubt, but they will do so with, how do I put it, more mental gymnastics. They will, because they're more intelligent in general, they should be more able to construct a believable narrative. Anyway, those are just my thoughts. I'm talking too much, so I'm going to continue this video.
That's all I'm saying. This is among the ranks of the scientifically educated. Now, philosophers basically invented atheism. And if you do this, if you check the statistic for philosophers, it's below 1%. There are no religious, the only religious philosophers there are, they're like theologian philosophers, right? If you subtract the theologic philosophers, this number is essentially zero, all right? So they're basically birthed atheism, the philosophers. And there's this talk, I don't know here in Australia, what does the Bible in the public school class or not? No, is it by law or is it just by tradition? Is it by law? Okay, so in America there's this understanding that the state and the church are separate. And by and large, that's been honored for most of the history of the country, by and large. And what's interesting about America, a point that was a little bit alluded to earlier today, is that it was founded on the principle that the state has no religion. The state is indifferent to what religion you might have. So that means there's no authority over you that's going to tell you who and what to worship. And that's a state that we all take for granted, but so many places in the world that is not true. Well, there's a case in New Jersey where a middle school kid was lectured to by the history teacher in a public school, and the history teacher said, if you don't accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior, you are going to hell. And there's a little Muslim girl there, said you are already damned to hell. First point. Second, that Noah had dinosaurs on his ark. Third point he made is that Big Bang and evolution are just theories and you can take them or leave them. So I don't, like I said, I don't get into these. I just don't. We got people who do this. We've got the four horsemen. We got our boy here who's coming up after. We got people who fight this stuff. I'm not one of those, really. I'm doing this because, like, I know you're all, this is the bone I'm throwing you, but I don't do this. So, but then I thought about it and I said, I have an op-ed, a letter to the editor on this that I can write. And I left out the part about Jesus. I left that out. Because if that's how he feels, he wants you to be Christian, that's okay, fine. I left that out. I went to the rest of what he said. And this was my letter, as it appeared in the New York Times. People cited violation of the First Amendment when a New Jersey, that's a separation of church and state, essentially. New Jersey school teacher asserted that evolution and the Big Bang are not scientific and that Noah's Ark carried dinosaurs. The case is not about the need to separate church and state. It's about the need to separate ignorant, scientifically illiterate people from the ranks of teachers. That's the problem. If he wants to believe Jesus is a savior, that's not synonymous with being scientifically illiterate, because 40% of American scientists pray to a personal God. What is identical with being scientifically illiterate is that if Noah was a human being, he did not have dinosaurs on his ark, because humans and dinosaurs did not coexist. All right? Every one of those scientists knows that, even the 40% who pray to God. So this is how I've sort of split the kingdom there. Then you get the billboard wars. Okay, this was fun. Big Bang Theory. You got to be kidding. God. All right. So this goes on. This is what we put up with. All right. So then then there was like, let's come back. Praise Darwin, evolved beyond belief. Freedom from religion found it. So the billboard wars are in progress here. There's some people who are like okay with God and okay with sort of how things evolve, so they ride the fence. So here's a bumper sticker: the Big Bang Theory, God spoke and bang, it happened, you know? So they're excited about both God and the Big Bang. But then we had this idiot back in May, Judgment Day. Did this Judgment Day stuff reach below the equator? Jeez, okay. Yeah, it was. Now the good thing is unlike other predictions, like Jesus will come one day, this had a date, okay? You could test it. This was like easy to test. You just sort of wait around for it, all right? So now it turns out that May 21st was only the day Jesus was supposed to show up. The actual end of the world is October 21st. So the end of the world is still to come this year. This is directly from the website. So I had to tweet. So this is May 21st. So on May 21st or May 20th, I tweeted this: if Jesus actually arrives May 21st, it'll be easy to convince skeptics. If he doesn't show up, do the faithful become atheists? That was my question. Now, in a Twitter stream, it's a live conversation with complete strangers. Everybody depositing their 140 characters worth of thought. So here this is. There was a huge reaction to that tweet. Now, you would expect that most of my followers, or at least a big fraction of them, would be sort of atheistic. So you'd expect people to say, this guy's an idiot, why are we even spending any time on them? Well, one such person did make such a reply, but not in the way you might think. No, anyone who's read the Bible knows this camping asshole was full of shit from the start. Okay. So what do you do with that? So this is somebody complaining about the prediction of Jesus coming because he says this other guy doesn't know jack about the Bible, but this guy does. And went on, there are other places where people quoted that one can't know when Jesus comes. So the fact that this guy's saying he knows means he doesn't read the Bible. So this is what's out there. People who are ready to vociferously argue about who knows the Bible the least. September 11th, 2001, we just had our 10th anniversary of that. I happen to live 3.5 blocks from what became known as Ground Zero. This image was taken outside my dining room window. The North Tower is on fire. These are 110-story buildings, the World Trade Center towers. This image is the instant the South Tower was hit. It was hit from the left. You could not see the entry point because we're blocked by this other black building. It's a hotel, a 50-story hotel, which is just kind of in the foreground. You see part of the South Tower punching out. This is before the jet fuel had ignited. And when you ignite jet fuel, you set a deflagration wave, not a bomb wave. It's a different kind of wave. It's not accompanied by a shock. This is a split second after that. The fuel has ignited, creating more pressure, and within a split second of that, the entire South Tower was engulfed. And this is fragments of plane and bodies and office coming out the other side. Now, why am I dragging you through this? 62 minutes later, both buildings had collapsed. And there was blue sky where there was once these buildings. This is directly outside of my apartment building, and the emergency vehicles had come. This is the pulverized World Trade Center dust that had settled several inches of it. I say this because shortly after this gentleman got up, President of the United States, George W. Bush. This is actually my photo of him. I was in that room at that time when he spoke. See the medals there on the table? I was on a committee to tell him who to give those medals to, the Presidential Medal of Science. And so he actually gave them to everyone we told him to give them to, except he didn't read their citations. He's smart enough to know not to pronounce any of the science words that were in the citation. So he put the medal around the neck. Somebody else read the citations. Shortly after September 11th, he gets up. I don't remember where he gave the speech. And he says, in an attempt to distinguish we from they, he says, our God is the God who named the stars. This is before I was on his Rolodex. You know, I could have saved him from himself, okay? It's a loose quote from Genesis that says God named all the stars in the sky, okay? First of all, it's the same God, so he's got that wrong. But Allah, God of Islam, and God of the Jewish God, it's the same God. They call them different names, but it's the same book delivering you the same God. Apart from him getting that wrong, he says, our God is the God who named the stars. What he just didn't know, 2/3 of all stars in the night sky have Arabic names. 2/3 of all stars that have names, these are all the Arabic star names. All of these. I don't think this is the point he wanted to make. I just think he figured that out. Like I said, it was before I was on his Rolodex. And so you say, well, how does this happen? How do you get a culture where stars in the night sky are named by them? What was going on? How did that happen?
Just as a side note, I sincerely believe, all political posturing aside, has nothing to do with my personal political beliefs. Just based on simple observation of vocabulary, sentence structure, everything when it comes to public speeches, I believe that George W. Bush is the only president in history that I know of that is more stupid than Donald Trump. I don't think he's quite as evil as Donald Trump. I'm not saying he's a good person either. I'm just saying that Trump is quite evidently far worse. But I don't think anyone is as stupid as Donald Trump, just IQ-wise, besides George W. Bush. And let's not think that it's a coincidence or just some random anomaly that they both happen to be Republicans.
And you have to go back 1,000 years, and you get to Islam in what's the golden period of Islam. In that period, algebra was invented. Algorithm is an Arabic word. All these words that begin with AL, 10 to 1, it's an Arabic word. Our numerals are Arabic numerals. Did you pause and reflect on why we call them Arabic numerals? We just call them that, right? But somebody did good stuff with these numerals. It was in Baghdad 1,000 years ago where they invented algebra. And there was advances in mathematics, agriculture, engineering, math, all of these fields. All at a time when Europe was disemboweling heretics. So something changed. 12th century, this gentleman came around, Al-Ghazali, a Muslim scholar, learned. At this point, Islam is maybe just a few hundred years old. People are reading the Quran and interpreting it however they sort of want to and feel like it. There's not a coherence to the practice of Islam until he comes around and codifies the behavior of a good Muslim. In much the same way St. Augustine, in his book Cities of God, codified what it is to be a good Christian. How do you burn the witches? There's a recipe for that. They got to be upside down so the blood does, it's a whole itinerary for how to be a good Muslim. And in his writings contain the assertion that the manipulation of numbers is the work of the devil. 2, actions that you see in nature are the will of Allah. Well, if you drop a stone and it falls, Allah willed that. If that's your explanation, your curiosity stops. You combine everything happening in nature being the will of Allah to the manipulation of numbers being the work of the devil, and the entire enterprise of that golden era collapses. Now, historians, when they look at that era, they say, well, the Mongols came and so historians think of the world in terms of wars and kings. They think less about it philosophically, about intellectual movements or the absence thereof. Islam rose again after this period, didn't have science associated with it. No new inventions in math. You look at the period of Islam in Spain, the period where the great Alhambra was built. There is no attendant science going on there. It's done, it's gone. And it is a cost that exists to this day. There is 1.3 billion Muslims in the world today who are not participants on the frontier of scientific discovery. What's the best measure of this? Just check out the Nobel Prizes. I tallied them, okay? How many Jews have won the Nobel Prize? In the sciences, here they go. 25% of all Nobel Prizes in the sciences are won by Jews. How many Jews in the world? About 15 million tops? 15 million? How many Muslims in the world? 1.3 billion, which is huger, way huger than 15 million. How many Muslims have won the Nobel Prize in the sciences? 2.5. 2. I can't bring myself to call economics a science. I'm sorry. I just can't. I've tried. I've really tried. I'm sorry. That's how many. And the physics one was a Pakistani physicist, not a Middle Eastern physicist. So Jews have 50 times the number of Nobel Prizes. They're 1/80th of the population of the Muslims. It's 4,000 times the impact. I lose sleep every night wondering how many secrets of the universe lay undiscovered because 1/6 of the population of the world is not a participant on the exploration frontier. What thoughts have gone undreamt of?
The rest is what I described in the beginning. Yeah, I think he makes very valid points. Now, some people might think he's being unfair. I don't. I think he's just being honest about how he sees things. And I like how he lays out facts. He doesn't seem to be he doesn't have or exhibit hatred toward any religion. He just believes, much like I do, that it creates like a void of thought. It's arrogant in a way. One, it makes it to where people believe that we are the center of everything. You go back and like span the enormous fucking time periods that we've been through, that we know for a fact. Let's assume that you're not young earth creationists, because that's like, I don't even know how to talk to you. Like, if you believe that, like, we can't even have a conversation. Like, I don't know what to do with you. Like, you're kind of a lost cause to me. But if you can accept the fact that our little human or current version of like human life is like a tiny fraction of a fraction of the entire fucking history of at least Earth. And you think that it's all about us. Like, all, like 99.9% of all life that has ever existed has all like went through all sorts of tragedies and fucking suffering, and they've all died out just so that we can come about. One, it's extremely arrogant. Two, we're extremely imperfect in many, many ways. And it's just silly on its face. It's just silly. But more than that, it's not like, who cares? Like, okay, it's silly. Who cares? It's the real world consequences of this that matter. It's the the cessation of exploration. It's damning to the entire human population, especially in highly religious areas. And we can measure it. Like, without a doubt, we can measure it. And I think he makes a really good point. Like, that 1/6, assuming his math's correct, I suck at math, so I'm going to have to. 1/6 of the population of Earth has basically shut themselves off entirely, or almost entirely, from scientific inquiry for a long, long time. And given the point that he made and all of the scientific achievements that they had at one point, how much worse off are we that happened? I would wager way worse off. It's impossible to know, like, exactly where we would be right now if that, whoever that figure was that decided to explain what a quote good Muslim was, if he hadn't have went against like science and math and said that numbers were of the devil, where would we be? And I use that exact line of thinking to apply to right now. Of course, it's not as extreme. And by the way, I don't just attack one religion. I believe that this same idea happens in all religions, just to lesser extents, or more in some cases. It depends on what we're talking about. But overall, I believe that it's a net negative for the world, and the slow decline of religion and the world becoming more atheist overall, I see as a very positive thing. I just wish that it would happen sooner. Anyhow, that's just my opinion. Feel free to comment on anything that you think. Thank you for your time.